Welcome back, guys, to our class today. So in this class today, we're going to be talking about functions in Python. We are going to be having an in-depth class on function in Python, and starting from the definition of functions and how to define functions in Python and where functions come from, and everything about functions. So my name is Ihechukwu Ngumezi. I'll be your tutor for this class. So let's kickstart. In Python, a function is a block of reusable code that performs a specific task. Functions are used to divide a large program into smaller, modular, and manageable sections. They can accept inputs called parameters or arguments. Now, functions can accept inputs called parameters. Then those inputs, when they are coming from the function call, they are called arguments. Now, process them, that's the parameters and inputs, and return outputs if necessary. Now, functions help make code more readable, maintainable, and reusable. So this becomes very, very handy when you are writing a large amount of code, and your code is going to be you are going to distribute your code so that many people can see it. In fact, your code is open sourced. So Python helps in perhaps there is a line of code that you have written and you want to, in future, you want to manage that particular code. You don't just have to go back to each section that you repeated that particular code. You can just write one code, and whenever you want to edit the code, you can just edit that particular function and everything will be affected. So these are the importances and benefits of making use of functions. Now, when you want some data to be printed on a console, for instance, in Python, you use print. When you want to read values of a variable, you use input coupled with either integer or float. Now, these things are functions. Print is a function that is built in Python already. Input is a function that comes with Python already. Integer is a function that comes with Python already, and float is a function that comes with Python already. And I believe that you guys are familiar with all these functions. If you are familiar with Python, or if you're a beginner in Python, you must have come across print, input, integer, float. Now, it happens that a particular piece of code is separated many times in your program. Like I said before, it's repeated either literally or with only a few minor modifications, consisting of the use of other variables in the same algorithm. It also happens that a programmer cannot resist simplifying their work and begins to clone such pieces of code using the clipboard or copy and paste operation. So let's say you want to modify your work, you wrote a code, and later in future you wrote a simple let's say you wrote a code about printing a message, and your company uses that code, and the code is being utilized in your program, in, let's say, in maybe in there are 100 places or 200 places where your code is utilized, and perhaps your boss comes and tells you that perhaps this greeting message, we have to modify it. You greet the person with his second name first before his first name or his surname. Now you realize that modifying this code requires a lot of effort and time. But if the code was written with a function, if you have a function called message function, you can just go to the first function and just modify it. Once you modify the function, everything will be in place. Now, where do functions come from? Now, functions can come from Python itself, as we saw in the case of print, input, float, and all that. Now, functions can also come from models. Let's say you are importing the math model, you are importing models like other models. Let's say if you are into data science, you're importing pandas, you're importing matplotlib and all those things. So those things have their own functions. Now functions can also come from your code, so you can write a code in your program. You can also define a function. Yes, Python does that. You can define a function in your code also and call that function also in your code. Now from classes, functions can also come from classes called, but in the case of classes, they are called methods. Components of function needed to create a function. Now, for you to create a function in Python, there are components that are needed to create a function in Python. So the first component is the def keyword, which is the definition keyword. So you have to define your function. So definition here means all you need to do is just write def, then followed by your function name. So let's say if your function is message, you can just write def message, then followed by parentheses. Then the next thing that follows is parameters. So functions, parameters are optional in functions. So these are the values that are passed into your function, but they are optional. It's not a must that your function must have a parameter. Then the return keyword. So this is what your function actually returns. Now, without further ado, let us hop into Visual Studio Code and demonstrate all this with practical examples. Now, this is what a simple definition of function looks like. So you have the def keyword, which is this. Then you have your function name, which is this. Then this set of this parenthesis here is where you put the parameters that your function accepts. So these are the parameters that your function accepts that you can utilize in the body of the function letter. So this is the basic definition of a function. So let's just go ahead and define our first function in Python. So I'll just comment this out. So let's just define our first function and call it message function. Now our function does not accept any parameter. So what our function does is just we define the function, which is the function name is message, then we just print this, we print hello, then good morning. So this is what our function prints. This is what our function outputs whenever it is run. So the way to actually call a function is actually to call the name of that function followed by the parentheses. So let me just show you. First of all, let me just print something. Let's say our first trial. Then this is our code. So I'll just go ahead and run this code. Now, as I run this code is printed on our terminal. So now for me to call my function, this is how you call a function in Python. So all you need to do is just to type the function name followed by whatever that function accepts. So in this our case, our function does not accept anything. So we just write the name of the function, which is message, and empty parentheses. So we save and run the code. Now, as you can see, this is our function. Now, how does this work? Whenever you call a function in Python, what Python actually does is that it searches the code. Now, Python reads your code, the interpreter executes your code from top to bottom. So for it to actually accept a function, it must have seen the function before. So when we run our code started here and Python read everything. Then when it now came to the function call, which is this message, now it went back to here and it saw the function definition, which is this, then it now entered into the function and saw the print statement, which is print hello good morning. So this is how function is run. So let's say we modify this to hello, let's say good afternoon. We save and we run. Now, as you can see, the change has been effected also. So this is what Python, never forget this is what Python does. It must have seen the function before, then it goes through the code. Whenever it sees the function call, it goes back to the function. So never ever do this in Python. Now, if I take this message and I place it and I do the function call before the function, now watch what happens. It will throw an error immediately. It says name message is not defined. So it's seeing this message as a variable that is not defined, as a name that is not defined, because Python executes the code, it interprets the code from top to bottom. So never forget this. Before you call a function, make sure that that function has been defined. Make sure that that function has been defined already. So let's just try another function and see. So let's also define this function again. Define message function. Then it is not accepting anything. So suppose we have we want to write a code that actually tells an individual to enter a value. Now, instead of and we need to execute this in multiple places. Now, instead of writing this in every place that we need to display the message, all we need to do is just to write a function. So let's say we write the function define message and we say print. So this is what the function does: print enter a value. Now this is what this function actually does. So we save this code and let's say now this has been saved. Let's run this code and say let's call the function and see what happens. Now once we call the function, watch what happens. Now it says enter a value. So suppose we are actually building a calculator or something like that, and we just want the user to any point in the code, at specific points in the code, we want the user to enter his to enter a value. So all we need to do is just to write a function called message and call this function anywhere that individual has to enter the code, the value. Okay, so let's move ahead and let's modify this function now. Let's say we want to add a parameter to this function. So let's say I decide to add number to this function. Then I go ahead and make use of this number in the function also. So I want the function to display a message, print a value, and it will display number. So I go ahead and call the function and run this code. Now, as you can see, it throws a type error. The program has thrown a type error. It says message, parenthesis, missing one required positional argument. So it is missing a positional argument. Now, this number is a parameter and it is required. So it is required that an argument has to be passed during the function call. So this is what you have to put in your mind. Anytime you are running a function, anytime you're calling a function, you have to know whether this function requires positional parameters, key parameters, keyword parameters that are needed, that must be passed as arguments before the function can be called. You understand? So let's modify this and now say we are calling this function with, let's just put something like 60 here. we run the code, we save and run the code. Now, as you can see, it is no longer throwing an error. It is saying enter a value 60, which is this argument. Now 60 is an argument. This is the difference between an argument and a parameter. 60 is an argument. A parameter is this number. Now a parameter is what is required in the function definition to work. So when you are defining the function, you define parameters. Parameters are those values that are needed in the function definition for the function to function, while arguments are those values that are passed during the function call. So you notice the difference. Arguments pass through the function, pass during the function call. Parameter pass during the function definition. You understand? Now I can also change these to I can change this to a string, say red, and save and run the code. It prints it. So this is why Python is good. You don't have to explicitly tell Python that this is you don't have to tell Python the type of this. Python already decodes and knows the type, that this is a string, so it passes it and it prints it out from from these. Now it is also possible for you to actually reuse this variable here, number. So it is very, very possible. So I can decide to say, remember that I'm using this variable as a parameter in my function definition. So I can now decide to assign this number variable. I can decide to assign it another value. Let's say I assign it 4563. I save, I run. Now take note, I'm passing 2 as the argument, then I'm assigning this. So I will go ahead and print this number also. So I save, I run the code. As you can see, both of them have returned their separate values. Now this means that this number here is totally different from this variable number here is totally different from this parameter number. They are different entities. They are total different entities. So this is what you do. Now it is also possible for Python to accept more than one parameters. It is very, very possible for Python to accept more than one parameter. So let's go ahead and create another function, and that function, let's call that function, let's define the function and call it greetings. Now what this function does is that it actually accepts first name. It accepts your first name, then it accepts your last name, which is your surname. And what it actually does is this: it will print this good day, then it will concatenate it with your first name and also so it will print good day, then your first name and also your last name. So let's save and go ahead and call this function greetings. We save, we run the code. Now as you can see, it's showing another error. So who can guess the error? Wow, if you guessed that I have to pass 2 parameters, you are right. So I'll just go ahead and pass the 2 parameters here. Then I will say the first one, I'm passing my string. I'll pass my name and my first name and my last name. I save, I run the code. Now as you can see, it says good day. Now this is very handy. So if you have a code that actually greets people, let's say you wrote a website or you are working a banking system, and once the user logs in, it just has to greet the user. So this is how you do it. You just write a function and passing the person's first and last name or other names as parameters. So it is possible for you to actually have a function. It is possible for a function to accept more than one parameters. So let's try something here. What if I now decide to remove one parameter here, one argument, and pass the other? So I save and I run the code. Now, as you can see, it is showing a type error. So it is saying greetings, which is the function, missing one required positional argument, which is last name. So this, I have to pass an argument that corresponds with this parameter for this to work. So if I go back and run the code passing this, then I will see that I have my argument. So in Python, we have positional parameter passing, and we also have keyword parameter passing. So what we just did here is positional parameter passing. So our greetings function actually accepts first name. So my first name is Ihechukwu and my last name is Ngumezi. So what actually happens is that when you call your greetings function, it accepts Ihechukwu and maps it automatically to first name, which is the position of first name. It accepts Ngumezi and does this. So what happens when I interchange these? Let's say in my place we greet with our greetings is done. Our greetings is actually done with the last name, which is your first name, which is your surname first and your first name followed. So I'll just interchange these. I'll go ahead and clear this terminal and run the code. As you can see, it has changed. Look at what it's saying. It says, "Good day, Ngumezi Ihechukwu." Now, if I interchange these again and says Ihechukwu Ngumezi, it will also change. Now, the next thing you have to, the next type of parameter passing is called keyword parameter passing. The first is positional parameter passing. The second is keyword parameter passing. So how does keyword parameter passing work? So I may decide to, come here and say, let's say, I will just add here last name equal to this Ngumezi Ihechukwu. So I'm specifically telling my function that take this Ngumezi and look for where the parameter is last name and pass it to it. So it doesn't matter again the position. So I can also come here and say first name, fake this. Now watch what happens when I run this code. Now, as you can see, it has been reversed. As you can see, it has been reversed to the first. So this call here is actually known as keyword argument passing. Keyword argument passing. Now, it is very, very possible for you to actually mix these parameter passing methods. So it is possible for you to mix positional parameter passing with keyword parameter passing. So let's define a function argument, and this function accepts 3 parameters, and what it actually does is it actually adds these 3 parameters together and it displays the output, that's the sum. So let's just write that print. Then we go ahead and say the first one is x, then plus. So this is what it would display to our screen. This is what is going to display to our screen. Then z, then we are doing x plus y plus z, then equal to then x plus y plus z. So this is what the function does. The function actually accepts x, y, and z as parameters and actually sums them up and displays the solution. So let's go ahead and call the function. We call the function, we save and we run, sorry about that. We save and we run the code. Now it is saying type error, addition, missing 3 required positional arguments. So we go ahead and add our arguments 1, 2, and 3, and we run and see. Let's see the sum. Now it's giving us the sum. 1 plus 2 is 3 plus 3, that is equal to 6. Now it's correct. Now it's possible for us to actually mix the two methods of passing parameters. So I can actually decide to say this x. Now I'm using keyword. now I assign it to 2, then y I assign it to 1, and z I assign it to 3. So okay, let me assign z to 2, then I assign x to 3. So I'm reshuffling everything, then we go ahead and we run the code. As you can see now, we are now using keywords. So what it actually does is that wherever it sees x as a parameter, it will assign it 3, and wherever it sees y, it will assign it with the value of 1, and wherever it sees z, it will assign it with the value of 2. Now this is how you use that. Now I can decide to apply mixing. So I can decide to mix both parameter this and both parameter positional parameter passing and argument parameter passing. So as you can see, I'm actually passing this using positional, and this is keyword rather. Now I can decide to mix both keyword parameter passing and positional parameter passing. So as you can see, 2 and 3 are positional parameter passing, while this z is actually keyword parameter passing rather. So I save and go ahead and run the code. As you can see, it does the correct thing. But watch what will happen now. Let's say I decide to assign this and say y equal to 2. Then I run the code. As you can see, it's actually throwing an error. So it's saying that y has been assigned multiple times. So this is not what you would do. Whenever you are mixing them, make sure that the positional, because the positional parameter passing has a higher preference than the keyword parameter passing. So because I've already passed y, then passing it again here, it's like passing it 2 times. So all you need to do is making use of this approach is when you already pass this, you know that this belongs to a positional parameter which is y. So the next thing you have to do here is just to pass the remaining one, which is z. Is just to pass the remaining one, which is z. So do not make this mistake, taking a parameter that has already been passed and a positional parameter that has already been passed and assigning it to an argument and assigning it to keyword parameter passing. So please do not actually make that mistake. Now there is another method, there is another parameter passing. So you can have default keyword. So I can decide to say that my z is equal to 3 during my function definition. So when I come here now and I decide not to assign anything to my z, I save and run the code. You can see because z has a default value, a default argument already, you don't have to assign it. But if I decide to, let's say I assign it another thing, let's say 5, now this one that I assigned it will only overrun the default one, and it will take the previous one, like it will take the main one, the positional argument that was assigned during the function call. Now this method is also called parameterized function passing. So let's go ahead and write a function that actually returns a value. Let's write a function that actually returns a value. So let's define our function and let's just call it 1, 2, and 5. So this is our function, and the function does not accept any parameter for now. Then we now go ahead and say print starting our function. Then we now go ahead and return 1, 2, and 5. So let's go ahead and call this function. So let's go ahead and call this function, and we just say 1, 2, 5, and we save, we run the code. Now something strange happened. It's only printed this, it's only returned this as the value. Why? Now this is because this function is actually returning this, but we actually need something. We actually need a variable, or we actually need something to grab whatever the function is returning. We actually need something to grab whatever the function is returning, and we now execute that. So let's say we just add a variable here, and we say result equal to this. We assign result to this function, and we go ahead and print that result. Then we save and we run the code. Now as you can see, the function functions perfectly well now. So the function is basically doing, whenever you are calling the function and you are assigning the value, whatever the function returns, you are actually assigning it to this result variable. You are assigning it to this result variable. So let's quickly go ahead and write some few examples of functions that can do some things. So let's just go ahead and write a function that actually checks if a number is an even number. So if a number is an even number, it actually, returns even. But if the number is an odd number, that's if the number is not an even number, it will just return false. So let's just go ahead and run the code. And so we define it and we say even checker. So this is the definition. So our function accepts a number which is x, and it actually does. So from your mathematics, you know that a number is said to be an even number when that number is divisible by 2 without any remainder. So we go ahead and implement that in Python. So we say if x, now the modulus, that's the remainder division divided by 2 equals 0, then we return true. We go ahead and return true. Then else, no need to put else here, the function returns false by default. So automatically, if this is not valid, it automatically returns false. So let's go ahead and print. Let's go ahead and have a value. Let's go ahead and just print this, and we are printing even. Then we go ahead and run it. Let's put 3 here. We save, we run, and we see. Now as you can see, it has returned false. Now this function is basically, when you pass 3 to this function, it assigned it to this parameter, and it eventually assigned it to this variable x. Now it divides this by, it performs the modulus operation, division by 2 using the modulus division method, and if it is equal to 0, it should return true, that it is an even number. Else, so the function by default returns false. So what if we now change this to let's say we change it to 6, and we save and run. Now it has returned true. So let's just do something fun here. So let's just go ahead and request an integer from a user. So let's say num, then we go ahead and pass it to integer, and we say input. So we are requesting, so we say please enter an integer. So we are actually checking, we are going to check if this value is actually, we are checking if the number, the integer that the person entered is actually even. If it is even, we are going to print even. That's the number is even. But if it is odd, we are going to print odd. So we go ahead and write some conditional statements. If so, I've not actually covered this conditional statement, but I have a course coming on that, so I'll cover it very soon. So if you have not subscribed, so please subscribe to this channel so that I also have some courses, because I'm going to teach, I have a course coming on data science. So I'm going to teach data science. I will teach everything you need to know about machine learning. We are going to build some projects, and we are going to deploy those projects. So if you have not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel, like, share it with your friends so that they will also come and learn. So let's go ahead and continue. Now let me do some conditional statements here. So if so I'll just go ahead and call the function. So if even, so I'll pass in num. So what is actually happening here is if true. So if I'm passing this number here, so this variable, I'm passing it here to the function. So if it performs this and it returns true, I want to do something. So I will just say print. I will use string formatting here. I'll use string formatting here. I believe I've taught this in, so if just go to the first course I did, you will see this. So I'll use string formatting. I'll just say num, which is that is an even number. Then I'll now write my else clause, else. Then I will just write print. Then I'll go ahead and say num is an odd, sorry about that, number. So I'll save. Let me just clear the terminal, and I'll run the code. Now it's requesting for an integer. So let me just say let me just enter 5. Now it says 5 is an odd number. So let me rerun the code again and just enter 100. Now it says 100 is an even number. So can you see how this function is actually just made our work to be very, very easy? It just made our work to be very, very easy. Just call the function, and from the function, just apply whatever conditional statement you want to apply. Just call your function. After calling the function, then just apply everything you want to apply anything you want to apply, and it will just give you the result that you desire. So let's go ahead and write another function, another example of a function. So let's just come here and put the function here. So let's write which function should we write now? Okay, let's write the factorial function. The factorial function. So what factorial actually does is that, let's say you have a number 5, so it actually starts from that number. Okay, you have a number n. What it actually does is n times n minus 1 times n minus 2 times n minus 3 all to 1. So we are going to implement that now with Python. We're going to implement that, and factorials are very, very necessary in calculating permutation and combination problems, in actually knowing how to arrange and how to select things from a set of from a set of items. So let's just go ahead and run the code. So we are going to join it with this function that we have already written here. So we are not going to comment this. Let's just go ahead and write the code. So I'll just go ahead and say define, let me just call it factorial. Then our factorial function actually accepts n, which is a number, and which is an integer. Now the first thing that it does is that let's get a variable that we'll use to store our results. So let's just assign it to 1, and we say if n equals to 1. So let's just go ahead and return result, which is 1. Sorry, we'll go ahead and return result, which is 1. Now else, now this is what the function does. So no need to put else here. So this is just what the function actually does in default. But if you want, you can put else. But I don't like putting it because it is what the function actually does if this if clause is false. So what it does, I will just loop through for I in range. So I'm moving from 1 to n. So I'm grabbing from all the integers from 1 to n. So I'm going to multiply them with n. So that's what I'm basically doing. So I will just assign my result times multiplied by I. So when result is 1, multiply that result by 1. Save it in the result, continue. When I is 2, multiply it by 1, which is 2, save it and continue. When I is 3, multiply it by, that's 2 by 3, which is 6. So like that until you get to when n is n, which is the value that you pass. So I will just go ahead and return. So I'm returning my result. I return the result. Then after returning the result, let's just go ahead and modify this code here. So this is what actually happens. Now if this is what actually, so let me just put something here, then I'll print let me still use our f string, the factorial. So I'll just say number. So this is how you represent factorial. Number factorial equals to, then I'll just go ahead and call the factorial function and pass my number as an argument to it. So I'll just copy this code and put it back here. So is actually, so I'll just save and run the code, and let's see. So it says please enter an integer. So I'll just say let's put 5 and say, now it says 5 is an odd number and 5 factorial is equal to 120. So this is how you write functions. So it is also possible that you can actually go through a list with a function. So you can use a function to go through a list. So I will just comment this code that we have here already. So let's just write a function that actually goes through a list and calculate the sum of the individual elements in that list. So I'll just go ahead and define the function. Then I'll just say sum. I'll call it sum list function. Then it accepts a list, LOST as the short form. So I will just go ahead and iterate through the list, and okay, I will just go ahead and iterate through the list. So but let me just create a variable to hold my result. So result, I'll just assign the variable the value of 0. Then I will say for I in list. So it's going through the list for I in list, or let me just, for I in list. Then what it actually does is this: it assigns result, it adds the value of that I to result, and later it returns result. So let's just go ahead and run this code. Let's just go ahead and create a list. So my list, so I'll just use list comprehension here to actually create a list of values from 1 to 10, and I will sum them. So for I in range, so I'm moving from 1 to 10. I want 10 to be included, so I will just go ahead. So let me just go ahead and call the function. So I will now assign this function. So I'll create a variable sum. Now I'll call this function sum underscore list, and I'm passing my list to it as an argument. So I pass my list to it as an argument, then I pass my list to it as an argument, then I go ahead and print the sum. So I will just say sum of my list, then I will just equal to sum of my list equal to sum. So I will save and go ahead and run the code. Now, as you can see, it shows us our list. Now, this is the list that we got through our list comprehension. So list comprehension we did here. This is the list we got: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the sum is 55. So these are the basic things that you can actually do with Python function. But let me just show you one thing about Python function. Let me just show you one thing about Python function. So, but if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, like and share for the YouTube algorithm. So let me just show you another thing, something powerful about function before we end today's class. So let's just say I define a function, then I call it my var, and I now, I assign a variable, I assign it 5, and I go ahead and print, and I say something like in the function x equal to x is then x. Okay, so in the function x is actually the value of the variable in the function. Then I assign another variable x, and outside the function I assign it 10. Then I go ahead and call my function, then I print this x. So I just save and run the code. So what actually happens is this: in the function, like I said at the beginning of this class, that the variable here, which is x, is a different entity from the variable inside the function. So this x here is different from this x here. So that's what happened. When I ran my function, it just it didn't consider this. It just took the local variable that was assigned in the function. So this x here is actually a local variable. So that's why I wrote here in the function x is 5, while outside the function, while outside the function, x is actually 10. The value of x is 10. So let me just show you something. Let's say I use the global keyword and declare my x as this. I save and run. Now watch what happens. You see, in the function x is 5. Now outside, x is now 5 also. So what actually happened? When I use the global keyword for my variable x here, what it actually tells Python is that when I run this code, x was assigned the value of 10, but when I ran the code, it encountered this function. Now, what actually happens at this junction, Python breaks the code and enters into this function, and what it actually does is that it now encounters this X, and it is global. Because it is named global, the scope is now beyond this function, so the scope is everywhere in the code. So that is why the value that I assign to it in the function is the same value it returns after the function. So these are the basic things that you need to know about function in Python. So we have come to the end of this class. I'll advise you to practice everything that we have done from the beginning of this class even down to the end of the class. Now, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe, like and share, because we have a lot of educative videos that are coming in. We have a series in data science. We are going to be working on so many projects, all free of charge, and we also have some courses, some aspects of Python that we are going to cover, and I've done so many short videos, so you can feel free to go ahead and watch them. Refer your friends to come and learn even as you are learning. So I want to thank everyone for watching. Thank you so much for watching. So this is Ihechukwu signing out. Thank you. Bye bye. See you next time.